Hello and welcome to the second part of a review that should have taken only one video, but I'm making it harder on myself as this pandemic has kinda turned me insane, among other things. As before, didn't like the script, stress, blah 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 blah. I also don't have a story about getting into this game, just didn't catch my interest when it first released until I beat Lenneth, then I kept patiently waiting for Valkyrie Profile 3 and it never happened. However, we would eventually get more information on the likely star of the game, Hrist, and it would not come from the Valkyrie Profile mobile game, but the Star Ocean mobile game. Not looking at that at the moment, and if you need yet another exaggeration on my thoughts regarding mobile games, I got you covered.
Oh, my poor potential master. Haven't you learned your lesson by now?
Your boobs will be mine, Jolter! No matter how many times I roll these dice! Now bring it on!
I'll tell you what. I pity you so much, I'll give you this Japan event exclusive. A mere 4-star. Just a pale reminder of what you could have had. What are you doing?
Okay, I'm super scared. And I can rush your head like a watermelon. With your thighs or your boobs. Keep this shit up and I'll do it with my hands, you little creeper. That's hot. Don't you dare throw me at her. You're me, so save me, goddammit!
Oh, would you look at that? The banner changed to Brynhilder.
Goodbye, bitches. Why would someone pay $500 for a JPEG? We aren't real, so stop hugging me! I sacrificed college for you!
And for the record, the portrayal of the female master in that skit was basically me when I played Fate Go. I don't have a Jean Alter problem, you do.
Your feelings for her are not real. They are real to me!
Also, thank you very much to Kirsten Candelore for providing all these voices. I'm just sorry this took so long because I'm crazy and kind of a moron. So yeah, again, not really that high of opinion on these games, so stop requesting Genshin Impact for some bizarre reason. I really don't get why you guys want me to play that. Maybe I'll cover this stuff in the Star Ocean mobile game if Covenant of the Plume leaves me unsatisfied, but as you can tell with how long this review took, I want to get Valkyrie Profile done and over with. But before we begin, it's time for backstory, where the game kinda explains things, but not all that well. Or at the very least, those segments are very few and far between, and well, it's a pain in the ass to actually explain it within the context of the story. Basically, here's what happened. The Valkyrie, Selmeria, once served Odin, though the god got a wee bit greedy, desiring the soul of a warrior to become a Nine-Heriar. The warrior in question was actually Brahms, and he turned against Odin, somehow becoming an undead warrior. Selmeria initially seemed to be against him as one of the Nine-Heriar she had was killed by him. Also, that Nine-Heriar can actually be found too, by the way, though mostly just adds extra line of dialogue or two, not much else. Despite whatever problems they might have had, Selmeria eventually came to realize how horrible Odin was, and the two joined forces to take him down. Unfortunately, that didn't go well, likely because Odin wields Gungnir, one of the 4 sacred treasures. Brahms would have to be sealed inside of a Nine-Heriar to recover. Odin also invoked a spell called Sovereign's Right, which would force Selmeria to be put inside of Alicia to sleep, perhaps be reborn without any of the memories so he could start the process all over again. However, as we could see from the beginning of the game, things didn't go right. Selmeria is quite active in Alicia, as are her Nine-Heriar. During the opening, we see Alicia fleeing Krell Manfreg, with the voices of the Nine-Heriar telling her to get the F out, and her pursuer is Hrist, intending to kill Alicia and reclaim Selmeria's soul. Selmeria is then able to take over Alicia's body, tosses back the spear, and flees. Afterwards, the goal is to head right back to Japan. So remember the events of the last game with one particular dungeon I didn't dive into too much detail, the Castle of Japan? Well, that's kinda what Selmeria is trying to prevent, explaining her plan to Alicia, who is very reluctant to go, leaving them both to argue and... Okay, I'm skipping ahead, but these two have spent a long time together since Alicia was exiled due to having Selmeria inside of her. But hey, despite all the issues this causes, at least Alicia didn't turn out like a bridge Vegeta.
I think you're right, broke Vegeta.
Shut up, Ghost of Nappa!
What was that?
I'm not crazy! You're crazy! Especially you, Nappa!
Hey!
Naturally, when you have someone who could take over your body in an instant, it kinda sorta messes with your head. This is demonstrated with her attitude when trying to recruit the next important character. Rufus. Due to sailors having trouble due to the sea, likely interference by Odin's forces, they need to use a hidden road underground to get to Japan. Though the path is blocked by a forest and both areas contain a lot of monsters, so having a kick-ass archer on the team helps out a lot. Silmeria tries to nudge Alicia to do it, but, well, being on the run from Hrist and constantly relying on Silmeria's guidance has made Alicia's social skills, to put it bluntly, worse than mine.
Can I help you?
I know a great way to reach Japan, and if you wouldn't mind coming with me?
Silmeria does eventually have to step in and explain herself, though it's clear as Rufus keeps pressuring her, there's more to this archer than meets the eye. The following scenes basically explain Silmeria's character in a nutshell. She can be secretive and isn't afraid to argue back, a sharp contrast to Alicia, who is far more trusting than her. If she sees something that she can take advantage of, she won't hesitate in using it either, even if it means her secret getting out. Case in point, the Einherjar. Despite her reluctance to tell Rufus anything super vital, her actions basically reveal who she is, as she is able to get a nearby weapon, having one of the Einherjar within her try to take it, and now they can fight alongside her. Granted, they aren't strong enough to keep a physical body and have to be sealed away, summoned only for fights. Such a thing makes it pretty obvious to Rufus that she's a Valkyrie, and admittedly, there's a good reason for her doing this, as they need more numbers against the fearsome foes, and their souls are deteriorating, so the sooner they can be cast out of Silmeria, the better. Despite her cold attitude, Silmeria of course cares about their well-being. It's why I assume the whole return them to the living world thing is even an option at all, showing how different she is to Odin, since technically, she never claims any new Einherjar. There's also another ability she has, object reading. Honestly, it's mostly used as a convenient tool to help the party go from one place to the next. I mean, technically there is more to it, but I don't feel the need to elaborate on it. The one time I feel it's used in an interesting manner is through the scene later when Silmeria finds a familiar object. Through no dialogue, she is able to play a scene of the past, showing how Alicia was exiled, with her having to be carried off and clearly snuck out of the castle. To the world besides Rufus, she is considered dead, all to protect her identity. And well, for later events. Granted, I could have also just misread this scene, since it's possibly just a normal flashback. I mean, given my track record so far, would you even be surprised? Especially from a man who once had hair like this? Remember how I said Einherjar souls deteriorate? Well, there's one exception to the rule. Dylan, who is the next main companion. A former knight of Japan, he's still loyal to his country and to Silmeria, so they couldn't have asked for a better ally. Once they are outside and Rufus figures out that Silmeria is a Valkyrie, he figures she's there to just overthrow Japan in the name of Odin. After all, Japan is kinda doing something suspicious to have a fighting chance against the gods. When Silmeria expresses how she wants to help Japan if possible, we get to one of the reasons why I love this game.
Just tell me one thing. What will you do when you meet the king?
I'll assess the king's sincerity, then prepare Japan for war with the gods.
Count me in.
Why did I suddenly play that scene? Real simple. I know what a character is feeling through the action without seeing any kind of dialogue. Through these little moments, I can connect the dots to eventually piece together the nuggets of info, even if I don't know the full story. Granted, I already beat this game, so I have a huge advantage. It's something I feel stories and games need to do a bit more of. Though granted, it's not to say it's not being done at all or anything, just certain formats tend to limit it. Like, take the scene from Rufus for example. From that alone, I can tell he has a personal stake when it comes to the likes of Odin, and why Silmeria might have chosen him specifically from just Rufus looking at his ring. There are more scenes, but the review will drag out if I spend all the time explaining them. They are able to sneak into the castle, but want to assess the situation before blindly agreeing to whatever plan the king is cooking up. After all, while opposing Asgard is good, as we saw in Lenneth, not everyone who wanted to fight the gods was some noble person. We also see how limited Silmeria actually is, forced to hide inside of Alicia whenever she senses another Valkyrie coming. Thankfully, Dylan's expertise in the castle's layout, along with Alicia remembering her friend Dallas, means they can go underground to try and scope out the situation. Unfortunately, well, we get into some Hojo levels of screwed up. The three mages are creating monsters and messing with the undead to create their own army to fight Asgard. Despite the initial horror, Alicia is still happy to see her childhood friend Dallas, at least until Dylan and Rufus keep pressuring Dallas regarding all the experiments they had to fight through, in addition to finding more information. When Selmaria comes out and pressures him about researching the Dragon Orb, he finally breaks down and is about to confess, clearly feeling guilty, until King Barbossa, no, that's the pirate, arrives on the scene. Once again, failing to read the room, Alicia runs to meet her father and is presumably pushed away harshly. Or maybe he uses a spell, it's hard to tell. Did I mention I prefer the 2D graphics of Lenneth? The gang are chased away by the other two mages, only to eventually run to Hrist, who taunts Selmaria and threatens Alicia to force her to come out. The two argue regarding Odin's crappy policies, with Selmaria pointing out how they aren't exactly doing a good job of helping, only taking things, which is definitely true if we remember from the end of Game 1 and how Odin wanted Midgard to dry up. Hrist is forced to flee after losing her sword, though she could have easily just drawn out her halberd. I don't know, maybe her level wasn't high enough yet. She must be on hard mode and on level 1. They are eventually cornered and about to be captured, all until one certain glorious bastard teleports them out of safety. And who should it happen to be?
Where are we?
Did the castle collapse?
I believe we're outside.
It was a teleportation spell, Alicia, your majesty. I beg your pardon. I had no choice but to resort to such crude methods.
And you are?
Lizard. Lizard Valeth, at your service.
So out of curiosity, I did look at that mobile event, and that's how I found out Lizard is voiced by the same dude who did Shu frigging Shirakawa. Now granted, I do like his English voice actor in this game, and he's pretty damn good, though now it feels weird that he sounds sexier. I'm not the only one who thinks that, right? Anyway, this Lizard seems to be a past version and was serving as an apprentice to the three mages. Upon seeing Alicia, he was convinced to try and help her to do the right thing, and he even explains the true goal of Japan, to use their research and the Dragon Orb to create a world independent of the gods, to obtain true freedom and safety from them. And considering how powerful the Dragon Orb was when used by Loki, yeah, they could feasibly do that, hopefully, without any destroyed worlds or anything. Even a soldier of Japan like Dylan is hesitant in lending any support to them, but Selmaria says they are going to claim it all for Midgard. Also, Odin and his cronies never mess with this world ever again. Also, these scenes kinda reminded me why I love Selmaria. She's kind of a smartass too.
You say that now, but maybe you'll just take the orb and run to Odin.
Well, if that's your theory, then come along and keep it from happening.
I really wish we got more scenes of her like this, but yeah, all four, including all the Einherjar, are set to journey together to find the Dragon Orb. And then we cut to the reason why I'm doing it in this format in the first place. Chapter 3, aka the slow crawl of development. I'm not saying that as a bad thing, in fact I feel many scenes are vital in getting the full grasp of twists and betrayals, but in the original review, I felt like I was all over the place when describing things and just hated it for a game like this. This is also where we start getting into some really deep spoilers, so I would suggest clicking off right now and playing the game for yourself if you want to see things unfold, assuming you can afford copies on eBay. One flaw right off the bat I can list is, well, remember the three mages with how they want the Dragon Orb to make their plan succeed? They never harass Alicia or even attempt to get the orb themselves. No traps, no ambushes of any kind, they just sit back at Japan with their thumbs up their asses. Just feels like a wasted opportunity as they won't be important until after a certain reveal. Though there's also minor stuff here and there with the party, some of which to show how dumb Rufus can be, and a bit whiny, while another bit is to show how Dylan isn't just some meathead knight, able to demonstrate some knowledge when talking with Lizard, and giving me a quote I usually feel is given to me by commenters on my SMT videos a lot.
You know your lore.
Common knowledge for a loyal subject.
Their journey eventually has them meeting a familiar character, Arngrim, who is a past version so he lacks any development from the previous game. Then there's his boss, Leone, who is totally not familiar to the gang at all, and they are a group of treasure hunters. Since I already gave the spoiler warning, Leone is actually Hrist. It's not the best kept secret. They have the same color palette, the same voice, and her acting, while good enough to fool almost everyone, still manages to slip and reveal her true self. At the same time, there are moments meant to try and humanize her, or at least making her more human than what Game 1 did, which was basically, I'm evil Lenneth and I want to stab bitches. Though the two really at conflict at the moment are Dylan and Arngrim, with Dylan seeing himself as more noble due to his position as a knight for Japan, as opposed to Arngrim who he sees as a grave robber. Also, this line, It's so dumb it's kinda funny. And Leone is able to make it clear who was running the show with their partnership. You know, with how much time was invested in hiring Orgrim, earning his trust, or even fear with a stare like this, she has to top. I can't accept any other outcome. Fantasies aside, Dylan and Orgrim act like children, and Dylan only stops when Silmeria proves he can be trustworthy through the power of plot powers that don't work on them. And you know, when I describe it like that, I'm starting to only now realize how Silmeria is basically the mother for all these people, and I can only imagine how stressed out she feels at times. It isn't helpful when Alicia kinda acts like a child and seems to trust Leone, likely helping her to figure out how to use Alicia for her own purposes. The real meat of this dungeon though is towards the end. After the grueling fight, Rufus is struck by the energy coming from the dais. The ring he had was also knocked off of him. We start to see why it's so important as he's suddenly in pain. Quickly putting it back on, Lazard points out how humans shouldn't be hurt by the dais, and Rufus finally explains himself as being a half-elf, and Lazard uttering a familiar phrase from Game 1, he starts to understand why Silmeria chose him out of any other hunter. For those who need a reminder, gods have a static strength. Basically, think of the demons in the old SNT games, and how you couldn't level those up. So, someone who was weak could never grow stronger regardless of years spent alive. Such was the case for Odin, and the only reason he ascended to the top of the hierarchy is because his soul was shifted into an elf. Since elves can help in expanding the power of a god, they are referred to as vessels of the gods. This is relevant since Rufus was specifically chosen to be the next vessel for Odin, in the event something should ever happen to the Big G. I wouldn't discount limited mortality either, like old age or something. So the ring prevents Rufus from aging, though if the ring is off, well, bye-bye Rufus, as his soul will be burned away. And Silmeria chose him since it likely meant his combat abilities would be valuable, as well as becoming a potential ally due to his own hate boner for Odin. Not to say Rufus isn't using her either. After all, if Odin is taken out of the picture, he can finally have his own identity. Meanwhile with Leone, though she keeps up the act, she does something that starts to make you question her character. The next dungeon has Rufus still being distant from the rest of the party, with Alicia being the only one to really approach him, claiming how she's kinda sorta happy about Rufus's revelation, thinking she was the only one tormented by the gods with this kind of thing, and how she feared losing her own identity. And despite Rufus saying how she has it so much worse given her current situation, they are the same. They are both people afraid of losing themselves. If Alicia's naivete and cowardice makes her seem like a kid, Rufus's constant anger and whininess can also make him out to be more of a child too. In Alicia's case, she has someone who can fight for her, always pinch in if she finds herself in too much trouble. That much reliance, as we saw before, didn't help Alicia grow stronger. She can at least hold herself decently in a fight, though, let's be real, Silmeria is far more confident and likely the reason she remained alive for this long. Meanwhile, Rufus, given how he isn't with the elves, had to be exiled, likely due to his human blood since elves tend to be a secretive bunch. And given how he states he's afraid every night of Odin suddenly just taking over his body, I wouldn't be surprised if he just gave up on life and preferred being a loner. Unless the right kind of price is offered anyway. I imagine he would see forming friendships and such kinda pointless, hence his reluctance to try and become closer to the team. One could either see it as pointless if Odin ends up winning, or perhaps a reluctance to do so as he may feel he's letting people down and making them miserable by just suddenly vanishing. Granted, that's mostly just a guess. It's a really good scene and a big stepping stone for their relationship, and throughout all of this, Leone keeps looking sadly at the two, likely realizing the damage she helped inflict onto others. She later tries to bury a body and send a soul to Valhalla, not really having any reason to do so. Maybe doing it to try and relieve herself of some guilt since it's not like she uses any other Einherjar in this game besides one certain person. Really, this scene exists so Lazard can be suspicious of her and hint at her true identity. Though it's also called into question with a much more important scene, bonding between Silmeria and Hrist, likely the only scene in the game to do so. As Silmeria is tired and nearly falls over, Leone accidentally drops another big hint to her identity, with Silmeria knowing, but recognizing how weak she is at the moment, decides to play along. It's actually a nice scene between the two. Anyway, here's Silmeria throwing up. Also, if you're wondering why I'm not using footage more, a lot of this isn't properly synced up. Now you know the other reason why I wanted to give up the old format for a bit. I think there's a silent understanding between the two Valkyries given the look they share. Like they both don't want to start shit yet, especially with Silmeria in the bad condition she's in. At least that's what I assume was happening. Given a certain line Leone says, I'm assuming she's acting this way mostly out of loneliness, at least in the sense of not having someone she can relate to. Remember, Valkyries can only be active one at a time, so having someone like Silmeria fighting alongside her and that jazz probably softened her up. That's the best guess I have since it's not like they did much else to be super close like this now, especially after their last encounter didn't exactly go well. Though once Alicia wakes up, it takes reading Leone's face to figure out how she doesn't want to get closer to her. I wouldn't be surprised if she just wants Selmaria to be the dominant personality. Either that or constantly punching down the idea she should be feeling any kind of guilt. We also later get a scene explaining the hardship between Japan and the gods. According to Dylan, a king from Japan was taken and made to an Einherjar against his will, which might have been Brahms, but that's just an assumption on my part. Also, gotta love how happy Alicia is at him explaining all this troubled history. Please tell me more about their suffering. I thrive on it. Why do you think we keep Rufus around? Alicia, you wouldn't happen to be a fan of Charmed, would you? Oh yeah, totally. Piper is my favorite character. Fuck. And in the middle of this conversation regarding how old Dylan is, only now Arngrim is informed about Einherjar, which admittedly leads to a humorous scene between these two idiots. Ignoring the suspicion going on between Leone and Lizard, the next dungeon gives us Leone now starting to show more visible guilt when it comes to Alicia when they discuss Selmaria, learning how she felt her parents hated her, likely not aided by the slap the king gave. But the journey, as well as Selmaria herself, has given Alicia hope, and she doesn't feel like the Valkyrie is a curse at all anymore, likely adding more potential guilt since I'm assuming Leone thought Selmaria was just being used or something. In other news, we get some foreshadowing on Dylan, for a demon arrives on the battlefield, only to flee at the mere sight of him. Really wish they did that more often. I mean, spoiling this reveal, yes, Dylan is the one hiding Brahms within him. It's pretty obvious as Freya and Odin talk over the scene of the party walking away, trying to think of a plan should, well, Brahms show up. We finally get to the last dungeon after so many dead ends, and the gang are able to retrieve the Dragon Orb. Selmaria is suspicious and tries to anticipate Hrist making her move, but is unable to foresee her throwing a dagger, and that suddenly gets the orb in the air. Okay, I think the justification is that maybe she hit Selmaria's hand, causing her to throw it up into the air out of pain, but the motion isn't done well. It looks more like someone else threw it at a different angle or came in and did some kind of slash to knock it into the air. Racing faster than anyone in the room, she snatches the orb, all while claiming she doesn't want to kill Alicia, with the latter left heartbroken by the news considering how comfortable she felt around the traitor. Though there's also this line I want to save for later.
It was all a lie.
If I don't stop the orb from falling into hands of fool mortals, things will be far worse.
Still, any remorse Hrist has is mostly safe for Alicia. Arngrim doesn't get any, for he tries to strike her down for being made a fool of and gets stabbed for his trouble. I'm also freezing this frame and wondering if the axe part of the halberd cut into his frickin' crotch. With him on death's door, Hrist elects to make him an Einherjar by force. Selmaria does reveal to the gang how she knew and did nothing to avoid a confrontation, fearing she wasn't strong enough. Despite how things look, Selmaria points out how because of Hrist sparing Alicia's life, there might still be some hope in the fight ahead. And no, Lizard doesn't mention anything about his own suspicions regarding Leone and Hrist, almost like you wanted it to happen. He also suggests going to Japan since they are kind of out of options at this point, with the hope being if the two sides are fighting, maybe they can do some damage to the side of the gods and secure a win, or at least the orb to turn things around, mostly since they still want Selmaria anyway. I should also mention something at this point for those interested in the gameplay. If Arngrim and Leone are at level 40 when they leave the party, you can get some really good gear. The same goes for Lizard and Dylan too, and I mean gear that's likely going to help you into the endgame. It took the final boss before the game became challenging for me again, which I'll get into why later. While Hrist is presenting the orb to Odin, she seems less than enthusiastic, even reluctant for more aid when Freya offers some help. And so begins Alicia's worst day ever, the fall of Japan. After fighting their way past the god Ulf, who's really only there to show how much the gods hate humans, they race to stop the execution of the king. The three mages, who finally do something in this chapter, are offered to be spared should they serve Odin. Only two elect to do so, with good boy Dallas choosing to die alongside his king. Just as Hrist is ready to kill the king, our heroes arrive on the scene and battle the two mages. Though as soon as they are dealt with, Hrist orders Arngrim to release the guillotine, killing Alicia's father right before her eyes as she just stands there. You know, with how many RPGs I play by now, you'd think I would just become numb to this concept. Showing some semblance of mercy, Hrist plans on giving the gang until nightfall to make a decision, but the mercy is cut short as the mages guzzle down some ghoul powder to become monsters, yet still retain their senses, enough to flee the scene and then make Dallas drink ghoul powder just to be assholes. That and to fit the first game's timeline by making him evil. Before his heel turn and vanishing from this game forever, he reveals everything, with how sending Alicia away was actually his plan, how the king did all of this for his daughter's sake, showing that yes, he did care for her. Even him smacking her away beforehand was to try and make sure Alicia's hands weren't guilty of any of the experiments, using innocent people for dark research, etc. Both he and Dallas wanted to do right by her, and you could totally see how well that's going. Alicia, thinking she can at least save her mother, tries to prepare herself to do so. Lizard also drops another idea that could be helpful. Rufus himself, due to the potential elves have by being vessels of the gods, were he to obtain some kind of power-up, otherwise known as the knowledge Yggdrasil has, he could rival Odin, and the gang need all the heavy hitters they can get, though Samaria shoots it down, and they kinda have other pressing matters. Also, it would have helped a lot if Lizard mentioned this way earlier. However, it's too late. The Queen, who could technically only be seen in Game 1, chose suicide over Hrist finding her, leaving Alicia to have an understandable meltdown. But she's repelled by Arngrim, who's mostly only working for Hrist since, well, shit's fucked. He sees no possible hope for the gang to fight the gods, and his line is actually suitable for Hrist's own character too. Plus, Salmeria's next line is actually really telling of Hrist.
It's always the same with you, justifying your sins in Odin's name. I'm sick of hearing about the will of Odin. I want to hear what you think.
No matter how many times Hrist denies Salmeria's words, yeah, Hrist is basically a puppet of Odin, and I imagine after years of serving him, the attitude of basically being evil Lena stuck around because her sister's words failed to get to her. Again, we'll come back to this, mainly since other stuff is going on, like Lizard noticing the presence of the other two mages, and Dylan and Arngrim wrestling with one another rather awkwardly instead of using their swords. There's a doujin of this too doing it while the battle's going on, isn't there? In a surprise move, Salmeria ends up getting a good stab into Hrist, which even catches her off guard. Maybe the implication was that Hrist didn't aim right, but again, sometimes the actions aren't handled well in some scenes. To think it took looking at the story in this format to finally say it. Not much time is left to dwell on it, as the two mages invoke Sovran's Right, the spell Odin tried to use on Salmeria. Both Valkyries are trapped and left defenseless, with the party thrown back from the impact of the spell. Though that's when Dylan reveals the twist I already spoiled, setting Brahms free, effectively fusing their souls together and killing Dylan. I kinda wish we saw more of Dylan's thoughts on this, but I guess we can assume his fierce loyalty in the face of death was enough. It doesn't last long though, as Brahms tries to save Salmeria, their bond showing decently through all of this, though Freya comes and attacks Brahms while he's vulnerable. Salmeria tries to intervene, take the blast for Brahms, and well, Brahms is the one to end up on ice.
Iceman cometh.
Well, okay, he's technically crystallized, and yeah, I think you guys are pretty much seeing what's really going on. The timeline is changing, and with Lizard vanishing from the scene, a strange sigil over Alicia, something has gone terribly wrong. Hrist, Arngrim, and a trapped Brahms are all whisked away by Freya, and Alicia and Rufus are the only ones left standing, and unfortunately, Salmeria is now gone from Alicia's body, leaving them utterly clueless as to what the hell happens now. Also, I won't be going into too much detail regarding the conflict between Freya and Odin since it's kinda pointless. Basically just there to remind us of how evil Odin is while also being lax at certain things, like not caring about the Valkyrie Salmeria while Freya has a slightly different opinion. Keyword being slightly since she would never raise a hand against him, and it's not like she turns into a good guy or anything by the end either. Rufus and Alicia aren't taking any of this well, the half-elf even lashing out at Alicia until her sadness hits close to home. This part is basically the two bonding together, having nothing else to do beyond fighting Odin, since they lack a home thanks to the asshole. Taking Lizard's idea from before, Rufus reasons out that he can reach the world tree atop Yggdrasil to obtain the knowledge to become a god there, and hopefully reach Odin's level of power. Alicia wants to go fight Odin as well and wants to team up with Rufus since she's kinda scared of doing it herself, likely not helped by certain recent situations. Sadly, the plan is a bit more complicated. Apparently there's a rule that humans can't enter Yggdrasil, and without Salmeria, Rufus thinks it's unwise due to her limited abilities, like the magic plot device of object reading. Though he does change his mind, at least allowing her to accompany him to a certain point, which she gladly does. And yeah, if you're wondering when her mental breakdown would finally trigger, this is it. Rufus finds a way to Yggdrasil by passing through a stone wall. Unfortunately, Alicia can't join him and she bangs against the wall out of desperation. I even think her hands are supposed to be bruised or bleeding, but hard to tell with 3D visuals. The act does make Rufus rush back, not wanting Alicia to hurt herself anymore. It's another good scene, showing how after losing 95% of everything she loved, she's not in a good place mentally, still relying on people and feeling more alone now than ever before. And a good thing Rufus came back too, for the Aesir are here, chasing the duo down. As they hide, the situation seems hopeless, and Rufus would rather take off the ring and die than allow Alicia to be a distraction for him. Fortunately, an elf woman appears to help. This requires some explanation. Elves are kind of a secret lot and don't like outsiders. For example, if you attack or run into any elves throughout the forest, they will teleport you back to the beginning. In addition to being vessels, they are also servants to the gods. For some help Lenneth during her mission in dealing with the demons and repairing a gem. So having a pure elf break away from this, actually killing some Aesir, it kinda makes Rufus a bit distrustful of her, though Alicia does show some backbone and tells him off for his attitude problem. This elf is Rosalie. Someone kinda sorta hinted to be Rufus's mom based on her reaction to his attitude, but aside from that, she's basically here to give info and die. Speaking of death, turns out only chosen Einherjar or the undead are allowed to pass through. With Plan A not possible, she sells for Plan B. And it's an incredibly risky plan that could turn Alicia into a monster like the mages, though Rufus has an alternate idea to help with it. His ring. The goal would be to take the ring off, let Alicia drink the ghoul powder, and put it on to stop her from dying, and then the journey past the Bifrost into Valhalla so Rufus's soul won't be burned away. After acquiring some ghoul powder through the most annoying backtracking part in the entire game, the duo return to the same spot. Rufus is understandably nervous about this plan since, well, this is basically kinda like suicide, but Alicia's so desperate to not be alone that she snatches it away from him, guzzling it faster than my family consumes booze. Cornered by more Aesir foot soldiers, they are nearly killed until Rosalie appears to pick them off and lure them away, sadly getting killed in the process. Yeah, if there's another part of this game I don't like, it's this moment. I don't know, maybe if she appeared earlier or something, or Rufus actually explained more of his history, that might have made me more sad that she died, but well guys, I didn't even remember her name and had to look it up twice for this review. Skipping some parts since they are mostly for gameplay purposes, we cut back to Odin and Freya, and I'm only bringing up this scene since I want to bring up both timelines. See, in the original timeline, if Samaria was crystallized, why did Brahms have her? Turns out, based on this scene, it was to help stabilize Midgard since there was no Dragon Orb. That and Brahms didn't want Odin to have her, and chances are she would prefer to be trapped as opposed to being mind-wiped and being Odin's slave once more. In this timeline though, Freya is trying to get Odin to use Brahms to help stabilize Midgard before it's eventually destroyed, and he refuses. Good to know we can blame Odin then for the past several years, especially 2020. So now, Midgard's destruction seems inevitable unless Rufus and Alicia beat him. Speaking of the couple, at this point they made it to the foot of the world tree. As they rest and admire the beautiful sight, it's pretty clear they love each other, all without them needing to actually say it. And this is the action that spells it all out.
You can throw that ring away, you know. In Asgard, time is eternal. You won't age at all while you're here. Go ahead. It's safe for you to take it off.
I know. But it's become my good luck charm.
It's too big. It looks silly on you.
Well then, another argument about splitting up to avoid Odin's wrath, or at least increase their chances of success. But Alicia, still being super dependent on Rufus, doesn't want to, and with the lewd handholding, I think it's safe to say that yeah, they do love each other. And honestly, I like this relationship way more than Lenneth and Lucian, mostly for the development we have seen, and their chemistry honestly works 10 times better for me. Once they make it to the top, Odin arrives and even brought one of the sacred treasures, Gungnir. Despite me beating him, and in one turn I might add, Rufus is Shoryuken and rendered worthless in the fight. Both he and Alicia keep trying to defend each other, both willing to sacrifice their life to save the other, though to no avail. All seems lost, until a familiar ally decides to return.
The mage from Japan. Using astral projection to sneak up here. You've crossed the line, all of you.
Blizzard?
I finally found you. Forgive me. After my teleportation spell failed, I became separated from the group.
Please help us!
Of course. Though I doubt I'll be much of a match for him.
Lord Odin! The distortion I felt! It is him!
Freya!
Wave my command! Upon the loom of fate, blood, flesh, and bone for these souls entwined. Spin me no mere puppet of you!
Soul transfusion. How can a mere mage wield the power of a god?
This is no mere mage!
Yep, Lazard had planned for everything, including having the soul of Selmaria to give him a huge power boost. Thus, he finally betrays the team, taking Odin, who is now in Rufus's body, and leaving the scene. Alicia, well, given how dependent she has been on Rufus, and given how she's clearly not over the grief of losing her family, losing Selmaria, and, well, now Rufus, she sadly tries to kill herself, not seeing any more kind of hope at this point. Though Rufus thankfully dashes away such thoughts, for his soul is still technically around. Now knowing Lazard has betrayed them, Rufus still believes they can turn things around since Odin is kinda out of the picture and everyone would likely be distracted. And admittedly, despite the dark description of, well, Alicia trying to kill herself, this does lead to a funny scene which does kinda help show a rare angry Alicia moment.
Ow! I'm so sorry!
Just kidding. Hey, I'm only a soul now.
Ugh.
First thing in order though is to restore Rufus's body, basically using whatever power of Selmaria is left in Alicia to reform a new one. I'm guessing this is similar to how Einherjars gained their form without a giant hole in it. She would be able to try it, but the fight ended up knocking away a key ingredient, the ring. To be fair, Rufus did say it was a bit big on her, so this isn't too surprising that she'd lose it. After slaughtering more demons littering Yggdrasil, Rufus is able to return to the party, the two of them able to share a cute scene of hugging and more lewd handholding. Now, one might wonder why they just don't go back up the tree and get the knowledge Rufus needs to become a god. Well, the game actually has an answer when you reach the top. Lazard doubled back and sealed off the area so he wouldn't have any more competition. According to a guide, this supposedly powers up their soul crushes too, which both of them look so much cooler than their originals. And it's a nice little detail I like. Not everyone is in high spirits, like Freya, who failed to catch Lazard and laments the loss of Odin, clearly caring for the giant douchebag despite their arguments. When Hrist approaches her other boss, Freya lashes out, though at least apologizes. Hearing about the dire situation, Hrist wants to take the Einherjar to retrieve Odin. However, no one is budging, ignoring Hrist as she searches for Arngrim, which seems to hurt her feelings, and Arngrim himself is laying down on the rug of the castle for some odd reason. Maybe they can afford super comfy rugs? Anyway, despite Hrist's orders, he ain't budging from his spot and explains to her why no one else wants to help her. Odin's gone, and he was planning on letting Midgard die. He is a tyrant, and only a moron would willingly obey him now. Even their own potential deaths at the hand of Hrist or Freya are meaningless since, well, none of them besides Hrist is even doing anything. Remember the line I showed with Arngrim, how a conscience is something he couldn't afford? I imagine that goes for not just him, but Hrist and perhaps even all the Norse gods. In Game 1, there do seem to be some gods that are okay with humans, but for all we know, they either don't see Einherjar as the same as humans due to the strength they possess, or it's all just an act, like with Ulf earlier. Thor is the one example I point to, since while he does compliment every Einherjar, his dialogue feels more like he's writing, "Have a nice summer" in their yearbook. Basically just doing it out of obligation as opposed to any real attachment. The MCU Thor, he ain't.
I believe you're alive. I saw you die. I mourned you, I cried for you. I'm honored.
At the very least, that's my assumption, mostly based on how Odin had to gain great power, so I imagine the only reason he's ruling is because of strength alone. I'm not saying a lot of compassion or great leadership is what I'm trying to say, and it shows with Hrist, who has done everything for Odin and now seems aimless. Arngrim was at least smart enough to snap out of it and even tries to join Alicia and Rufus, who understandably want to kill him on sight. He realizes his apology isn't enough and offers up his own life. He was already kicking himself by being just some lapdog, and the blow is made worse when he finds out Alicia and Rufus were brave enough to stand against Odin while he just stood there and did nothing. I wouldn't be surprised if in the other timeline, he tried to kill Odin out of revenge, and that's the reason why Freya didn't want his reincarnation to join their ranks in Game 1. Likely sympathizing with Arngrim since he was being used and in dire need of help against a dude who made Odin look like nothing, they managed to recruit Arngrim to the cause, with Alicia returning him his sword. He's not the only one who wants to switch sides, as Hrist eventually finds them as they enter the treasure room. Naturally, she doesn't receive a warm welcome. Fortunately, she's done her homework on Lizard, and shares the plan he seems to have so far. Remember how Japan wanted to create a world free from the reign of gods? Lizard did just that, though for himself only. Alicia isn't too trusting this time and wants Hrist to release Brahms and return the Dragonor before any kind of deal takes place. Unfortunately, Freya arrives on the scene and, well, for those who need a reminder of Freya's own strength, yeah, she doesn't have a sacred treasure, but she'll still combo your ass like a Killer Instinct character. Granted, I still beat her in one turn, but video games. And to make matters worse, Hrist is just standing there. Really, it's about her being torn, not yet ready to make the full jump to the other side. Though before Freya can rain down spirit bombs on a downed Alicia, Hrist finally makes her decision.
Welcome to the fight.
I could totally play that on repeat, but this review is long enough already. Though this moment doesn't last too long since, again, this is freaking Freya. Arngrim is ready to give up his life, but Hrist has enough common sense to counter her with the Dragon Orb and repel her as they make their escape. Now in Lizard's world, they can recuperate, with Hrist also turning down Arngrim's feelings. I swear to God, she's gonna be a tsundere if there ever was a Game 3. Brahms, now free thanks to Hrist, is able to basically pick her mind apart, though the two are still hostile, save from fighting each other only thanks to Alicia pointing out the obvious enemy. And soon, Lenneth herself arrives on the scene. She was hinted at earlier by Freya, but this is not the Lenneth of their timeline. Rather, this is the Lenneth from the first game, who came to this world since Lizard's actions are affecting her timeline. Really, Lenneth is just here to explain how this Lizard came to be and to kick his ass. The only real significant detail here is when she assumes Hrist has everyone under her control, Hrist is quick to correct her, saying that they are all united to save Selmaria. This is a relief to Lenneth, as this Hrist is much different from the one who hijacked her body in the last game. And this scene is pretty much the end of Hrist's own character development. They eventually encounter Lizard, except not really, just a homunculus that's more monster than man. The same goes for Selmaria, feeling he didn't need her either. I'm guessing he jumped bodies to take over Odin's or something. After beating the twin monsters from hell, Alicia is able to bring back Selmaria through the same method used to bring back Rufus, giving her a physical body, and the two share a sweet reunion, Selmaria acknowledging Alicia growing stronger in her absence. Unfortunately, if you are hoping for more development regarding any of the Valkyries, Lizard's boss fight dashes such hopes. Even despite being a god, ignoring his own hatred of those beings, there was only one thing he ever wanted.
Rule over all is but a fleeting fancy. I have but one desire. To rule my beloved goddess. Welcome, my dearest Lenneth Valkyrie.
Pathetic wretch. All this was merely to satisfy your lust.
Despite Lizard being a creeper, this was a funny line to me, because it's so damn accurate. While the character is a master manipulator, able to skillfully keep the timeline stable despite the intense temptation of screwing with things, and even topple two of the strongest characters in the series, he did it all for his waifu who keeps spurning him. If Valkyrie Profile was more popular, I have a feeling Lizard would be involved in way more shitposts for this. His obsession is such a key part of his character, it doesn't matter what he says to defend himself, especially when he was so selfish. Also, Alicia is undead and homeless now, so... No, you didn't do it for everyone else's sake. At best, everything benefited Rufus, and you intended to screw him over. He does eventually end up using Sovereigns right after the first boss fight, capturing Lenneth and the others, and destroying the bodies of Hrist and Selmaria. By the way, Hrist was the only polearm user, so you can imagine my anger when I need to go to the Seraphic Gate to unlock her permanently. I wasn't exactly pleased. Brahms tries to stop him, but apparently Lizard is Shadowcat now, able to phase through his moves and deal a severe blow to him, all as he manages to save the souls of Hrist and Selmaria. So, Lizard is basically won, right? The gang lost their top tier fighters, Brahms' body is no longer undead in this dimension, so he can die and is injured, and there seems to be no way to win. Well, not true, as Brahms knows of another way. The Valkyrie souls in this world will fade away if nothing is done, so by fusing all three with a host body, they will create a new warrior of untold power. I'm assuming this is the reason Odin never allowed 3 Valkyries to be active at once, since if someone else did know the spell, well, everyone would be screwed. That's the only explanation I can think of, since otherwise this idea comes right the hell out of left field. Brahms wants to volunteer, but the injury makes this process risky, so Alicia volunteers instead. He also explains how this process is similar to how he did it with Dylan, and he ended up taking over the Knight's soul. Meaning, yeah, Alicia is going to be gone for good if she ever does this, but it doesn't matter to the former princess, even knowing she will die as she volunteers. Granted, I'm not sure why it can't be Rufus, but I'm assuming someone has to have the knowledge of manipulating souls. Rufus is naturally against this since he loves her, but Alicia, well, it's best to let her explain.
Please, think about what you're saying. Think of everything you and I have been through to reach this place.
I have. I've been thinking about it a long time. Ever since I was little, I always wanted to be separate from Selmaria. But once it happened, I felt so empty. And that was when I realized I need Selmaria.
Regardless of what has happened, Selmaria has become a part of Alicia, one she can't just forget about. The bond they showed earlier, if you told me they were siblings, I would believe it. They have known each other ever since Alicia was a child, and Selmaria is the only family she really has left. There's a chance she could save that family, something she never got since the fall of Japan. Throughout the game, she has clung to others, but the reason has changed from cowardice to not wanting to lose anyone else. It's why she stood by Rufus' side despite certain death. It's why she was willing to give Arngrim another chance. And it's why she wants to save Selmaria, and arguably Rufus too, since they're all gonna die anyway if nobody does anything. Not to say she does this with all smiles though. Still sad about her own fate and how she can never be with the Archer. Then again, she's currently undead, so their future together, not looking too bright. Heading back to Lizard's place, it's admittedly creepy with no music and only seeing Lizard flying in the background, admiring Lenneth in this creepy way. And my god, I just realized something. He has become the Collector now, which is appropriate given what's going to happen now. Also, to save you some time if you're going to play this game yourself and don't mind spoilers, do not attack the crystal right away. Lizard needs to be stunned first before anything. I tried not to follow this plan, and the fight took forever. Anyway, Lenneth is finally freed.
No! It's no longer a collectible!
This opportunity allows Alicia to carry out the plan. With their powers combined and Selmaria proud to see Alicia becoming so strong, they all fuse together to become the true Valkyrie. Lizard takes this very well.
That low, stupid, ignorant human princess steals my dear Lenneth and throws my painstakingly prepared history into chaos and disarray.
Now this fight. Okay, first of all, equip True Valkyrie with any good gear you can. She's the only one who can deal good damage to Lizard, as everyone else, well, they kinda do minimal hits really, even Brahms. Also for this fight, I shit you not, I forgot I had the damage reflection seal stone. So when Lizard was low on health after my failed attempt to kill him, when he attacked, he ended up killing himself. It was the funniest freaking thing I had seen in this game, and I couldn't resist sharing it. I really love this combat system so much. Lizard, stumbling and angry, manages to stab Alicia, though it's way too late and doesn't even matter. She was gonna die anyway, and he doesn't have enough power to keep the fight going. With the last of her strength, she kisses the ring Rufus gave to her, and fades away, leaving the half-elf distraught.
Alicia!
Alicia.
Alicia!
And so the world Lazar created is destroyed, leaving only Arngrim, Brahms, and Rufus as the last men standing. And yes, I do realize how hilarious it is that the final characters to survive a series well known for its female characters are the guys. With the world in need of stabilization, Rufus elects to take Gungnir and take charge of Asgard, finally taking a new twist on his role with Odin, and with Rufus in charge, the undead will likely hold less of a grudge. Besides, I'm sure they're doing the twerking Macarena at the death of Odin. Brahms, feeling mortal, elects to stay behind and die with the world. If you haven't been paying close attention to the story, this can seem confusing. Hell, it took me extra research and going over the plot yet again to understand his motivation. Since he was turned into a Ninhiriar against his will, then becoming undead and living just to fight, I imagine death seems like a relief now. Arngrim wants to join him, likely feeling the need to repent and just overall not having any other place in the world, but Brahms charges him when protecting the Dragon Orb. And then the game just ends as we see the souls of the true Valkyries split into 4, escaping Lazar's world, meaning that yes, the Valkyries can return. Alicia, though, her situation is a bit more complicated, but we do see how she's handling things, for she is now a child in the village of Coriander, the same place Lenneth was at least I think that's it. She ends up tripping and is helped by a cloaked figure who is in fact Rufus. With a kiss to his ring, now a symbol of love rather than hate and fear, Rufus vanishes, leaving Alicia to lead a happy life. Now just don't get too involved, and I won't have to put you on any groomer list. As for what happened to Lenneth, the credits say something will happen, and we'll likely never know since there was never a Game 3. We've got Covenant of the Plume, which I'll cover it one day. For now, some final thoughts. Valkyrie Profile 2 is an amazing game and a worthy sequel. I love the characters, and for the most part, they are treated well. The relationship between Rufus and Alicia is especially good, filled with tender moments and a bit of tragedy to it all. I also really like Chris's development as she overcame being a slave to Odin and learned to fight for the right cause. I especially liked her since the story didn't make us feel too bad. While the story did try to humanize her, it didn't make us feel sorry for her. So when she's not really given the forgiveness, well, yeah, that's fitting, especially from Alicia, who, despite her soft-hearted nature, knew Hrist was one of the leading causes regarding the death of her family and friends. And we always had the potential of a third game to expand on our character some more. That said, Arngrim was mostly okay, he served his role decently, but not much else. Brahms and Dylan, though, sadly feel like they got the shaft, mainly since their story is mostly just told instead of shown, requiring me to explain it and even go back to understand Brahms' final moments. And Lenneth definitely got screwed over, showing up just to be used and tossed away by the main villain. I think I wouldn't have minded so much if at the very least, I didn't have to go through the Seraphic Gate to get the Valkyries back. Still, I can see why some would prefer Game 1, and I too once liked it more than this sequel, mostly for the Einherjar. But playing this again, along with making this super unnecessarily long video, really showed me just how much I love this game. I might do this format again if I feel some summaries like in the old reviews don't work. I can already think of 2 particular games I may need to do this for. Anyway, thank you to those patiently waiting for this video, and sorry for the long wait. Some personal issues got in the way, and the pandemic has been affecting my situation to the point I am sometimes scared of not being able to produce any kind of content, especially as my financial situation grows harder to deal with. If you don't wish to deal with YouTube and annoying mobile ads that are likely playing on these videos, please consider supporting my Patreon, which does have some benefits, like being thanked in the credits for certain videos, along with viewing the content early if I get it done on before Fridays. Alternatively, you can do the usual thing to help fight against the algorithm by subscribing, sharing my content through social media, hitting the like button, and even commenting. And of course, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Next time, I'm not gonna commit to a game. I keep making promises, and some I can't even keep. I mean, Gravity Rush 2 is 40 hours, what the hell? So I'll see you guys next time with whatever, maybe some more quick reviews to lighten my load. Although I can already tell you this much, I will not be doing this format for Valkyrie Profile Covenant of the Plume. I'm the smartest moron, and thank you for watching.